In the next 3 minutes, a $2 billion Russian arsenal is about to become the world's most expensive fireworks show. The weapon that does it? Not a $1 billion missile. It's a $500 drone built with parts from Amazon. At 05:30 a.m., 2 days after peace talks with America collapsed, Vladimir Putin unleashed his storm of steel, a final, overwhelming assault meant to crush Ukraine once and for all. The heart of that assault was the 107th Arsenal, a depot the size of 10 football fields, a Walmart supercenter stacked with 100,000 tons of ammunition. But Russia made a classic mistake. They built a fortress to stop an army, not a ghost. And this ghost wasn't working alone. While Putin saw a diplomatic failure, Ukrainian planners saw an opportunity, working quietly with American and British strategists. They were analyzing satellite feeds, decoding defensive weaknesses, and turning open-source American software into the brains of their attack. At 05:41 a.m., Tver Forest, 7 miles from target. A beat-up UAZ 452 van, the kind of vehicle that looks like it belongs to a local farmer, pulls to a stop under the dense forest canopy. The back doors swing open. In 30 seconds, 20 FPV drones are launched into the thick morning fog. The first problem, a 10-man Russian patrol armed with Iglas manpads hears the unnatural hum. The 60-decibel buzz of 20 tiny propellers is a sound that doesn't belong in a silent forest. A soldier raises the 3-foot launcher to his shoulder, a 300-mile-per-hour missile ready to fly. He gets a lock. Or so he thinks. The Igla's heat-seeking brain is looking for a hot engine against a cold sky. But in the 35-degree Tver fog, these composite drones have the thermal signature of a cold can of soda. What he's actually locked onto is a thermal flare, intentionally popped by one of 5 decoy drones that just shot skyward. The missile screams off the rails, chasing a ghost, and detonates harmlessly 500 feet wide of any real target. While the Russians are distracted by the fireworks, the main attack swarm dives low, just 6 feet off the ground, weaving through trees. To add another layer of deception, they use tiny, AI-powered speakers to mimic the chirping of local sparrows. It's brilliantly absurd. The UAZ doesn't wait around for a thank you. The driver floors it, hitting 60 miles per hour down a muddy logging track as a Russian quick reaction force closes in. AK-12 rounds rip through the air, punching holes in the van's thin metal skin. The SBU driver yanks the wheel, sliding the van around a corner like a rally car and releasing another decoy drone that mimics the van's radio signature, sending the QRF on a wild goose chase. The swarm is through, and the team is safe for now. The bad news? All that noise, the flares, the gunfire just woke up the next layer of defense. The very ground they're flying over is now the enemy. At 05:43 a.m., the second layer of defense doesn't shoot missiles. It waits patiently under the earth. TM-83 mines. These aren't your typical pressure plate mines. They're more sinister. They have vibration sensors that can feel a 50-ton tank approaching. A low-flying drone swarm should trigger them instantly, turning the drones and everything within a 50-foot radius into shredded confetti. And for a second, it looks like that's exactly what's about to happen. A massive explosion rips through the forest floor. The drone's HUD shakes violently as a geyser of dirt and rock erupts just ahead. But it wasn't a drone that triggered it, it was a deer. It turns out Ukrainian intelligence didn't just study military maps, they studied wildlife migration patterns. They knew a herd of about 50 deer used this exact path at dawn. A single decoy drone was tasked with a unique mission. It dropped low and buzzed near the herd, spooking them into a stampede right over the minefield. The mine's primitive sensor couldn't tell the difference between a 10-pound drone and a 200-pound deer. It just felt the vibration and blew itself to pieces. Russia just wasted 20 pounds of TNT on a forest animal. You have to wonder if the Kremlin thinks even Ukrainian deer are outsmarting them. The swarm is safe from the mines, but that massive pillar of dust and smoke from the explosion does something else. It acts like a giant flashing arrow pointing right at the swarm's location. At 05:44 a.m., the Krasuka 4 is not a weapon that fires bullets. It fires a wall of pure electromagnetic energy. It's the digital equivalent of a nuclear flashbang, designed to fry the brain of any electronics that get close. On the operator's screen, the world dissolved into a blizzard of digital snow. The GPS signal vanished. A red warning flashed across the display, connection lost. The drone swarm suddenly went blind. For most systems, this is a death sentence. Jamming is like trying to shout over a screaming crowd, but the drone's frequency hopping technology is like wearing a pair of Sony noise-canceling headphones. all that shouting just becomes a faint, harmless whisper. The drones could still hear their operator, they weren't lost. But the Russians had another, more insidious trick: GPS spoofing. They were now sending the drones a fake map, a sophisticated lie designed to trick them into thinking they were somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. It was a brilliant attack. But you can lie to a GPS signal. You cannot lie to Newton's laws of motion. The moment the fake GPS data conflicted with the drone's actual movement, the AI switched to its ace in the hole: pure inertial navigation. It's like taking the raw navigational brain of a SpaceX rocket, a system that feels every turn, every dip, every gust of wind, and putting it into a $500 drone. Now the tea party began. The swarm split. 5 drones, the tea drinkers, climbed high, acting as loud, obnoxious targets to keep the Krasuka busy. The other 15, the cake eaters, dropped even lower, skimming the surface of the foggy Lake Valdai, using the cold mist as a thermal blanket to hide from whatever came next. The connection snaps back into focus. They're through the digital minefield, but they've just stepped into a very real, very physical one. The Krasuka has woken up the guard dog with the big teeth. At 05:45 a.m., the Panzer S-1 opens its eyes. A 57E6 missile leaps from its tube. It accelerates to Mach 3 in under 2 seconds. 3 times the speed of sound, it's a greyhound chasing a flock of pigeons, and it's designed to never miss. This should be the end of the story. The Panzer's powerful computer can track and engage 10 targets simultaneously. But that computer has a fatal flaw. It's a genius mathematician that thinks only in straight lines. It expects a target to fly like a fighter jet, in predictable, sweeping arcs. But the drones aren't flying like jets. They're flying like roller coaster cars, and the Tver Hills are their tracks. This is the Tea Party tactic in action. The drones start leapfrogging. They pop up over a hill for a few seconds, just long enough to be seen, then dive back down behind it, disappearing from view. Every time a drone vanishes behind the curve of the Earth, the Panzer's radar loses its lock. When it reappears, the computer needs 2 to 3 agonizing seconds to reacquire the target, calculate a new firing solution, and redirect the missile. But the Ukrainian AI, running a sophisticated Kalman filter, knows this. It has predicted that 2-second blind spot with mathematical certainty. It's like playing a video game where you've memorized the boss's attack pattern. You know exactly when to dodge. The missile, expecting a target to be in one place, zips harmlessly through the empty air where the drone was a second ago. It's not a flawless strategy, the chaos is immense, and in the fury of missile launches, 2 drones are caught by shrapnel and vaporized, a calculated loss. 13 drones are through, they've beaten the long-range sniper. Now they have to face the close-range shotgun. At 05:46 a.m., less than half a mile from the target sits the AK-630 CIWS. It's less a gun and more an industrial buzzsaw that fires exploding 30mm shells at a rate of 5,000 rounds per minute. It doesn't shoot bullets. It vomits a solid wall of metal moving at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Red-hot tracers rip the air apart as the system goes active, creating a seemingly impenetrable dome of fire over the arsenal. But the AK-630 has an Achilles heel. It needs to see what it's shooting at. Its targeting computer is looking for one small, fast-moving object. The problem is the combination of the lake's surface and the thick fog acts like a giant shattered mirror. The radar isn't seeing one target, it's seeing a dozen shimmering, distorted ghosts. The Ukrainians don't just rely on this weakness, they weaponize it. 3 decoy drones peel off and do something utterly insane. They switch on high-intensity LED strobes, turning the lakeside approach into a full-blown disco party. The strobing lights reflect off the water's surface and refract through the fog, turning the targeting computer's confusion into a complete meltdown. While the system is trying to shoot at dancing lights, the remaining 13 drones drop to just 3 feet above the water. They use the 15-mile-per-hour wind gusting across the lake to get a final critical speed boost. The AK-630 goes berserk, unleashing thousands of rounds, but it's shooting at phantoms. Massive geysers of water erupt from the lake as the 30mm shells miss by yards. The only casualties in this final defense are a few terrified Russian fish. The wall of steel has been breached. There is nothing left between them and 100,000 tons of Russian ammunition. 13 FPV drones, a swarm of deadly hornets, sliced through the Tver fog. Their tiny composite wings turned the 15-mile-per-hour wind from Lake Valdai into a final graceful glide, aiming like hypodermic needles for the heart of the arsenal. Each 5-pound C4 warhead slammed into the 10-inch steel plating of the Toropets depot, striking just 6 feet from the main bay doors holding the Iskander missiles. Russia built a fortress, but Ukraine just drilled into it like it was IKEA furniture. But the real genius wasn't the impact. It was the anatomy of the explosion itself. The fuses were set with a 0.8-second delay. Why? Because the warheads needed to punch through the outer wall first. Inside, the arsenal was a maze of ammunition stacked high like a Walmart on resupply day. The C4 needed to be deep inside to start the dominoes falling. Each warhead released 5 megajoules of energy, triggering the Monroe effect, focusing the blast into a jet of molten plasma moving at 8,000 miles per hour. That pressure wave, trapped inside the sealed depot, bounced off the steel walls, tripling its destructive power like a rubber ball thrown in a steel cage. The shockwave ripped apart 50 steel support columns, and the 200-ton roof buckled and cascaded down. Thousands of Iskander missile casings, KB bombs, and North Korean 152mm shells were tossed about in a chaotic metal tomb. It was a blast equivalent to a small earthquake ripping through the arsenal like a storm trapped in a steel cage. It wasn't just fire. 100,000 tons of ammo started a chain reaction. A secondary explosion, equal to 200 tons of TNT, vaporized the depot's electrical systems. The Iskander launch servers went dark. The lights were still on, but the data was dead. A computer with its hard drive ripped out. In the immediate aftermath, 30 Russian logistics personnel, including 2 senior officers and 5 munitions engineers, were eliminated. The $2 billion arsenal, home to 8,000 Iskander missiles, was now a smoldering crater the size of 10 football fields. Spetsnaz and FSB units swarmed the area, sirens screaming into the fog. But the 3,000-foot column of black smoke told the real story. Russia was trying to cover up the disaster, but it was like trying to hide a burnt cake while the entire house is filled with smoke. 3 hours later, a US satellite confirmed it, a 200-foot wide crater, perfectly matching the predicted yield of 13 C4 warheads. The Toropets arsenal was history. And then, the strategic dominoes began to fall. The arsenal wasn't just a depot, it was the logistical brain of Russia's Western Command. With it gone, the entire network was paralyzed. Calls for support from the Donetsk front went unanswered. The encrypted network was as silent as a dead phone. Thousands of Russian artillery pieces in the Donbass, starved of shells from Toropets, became 10-ton paperweights. Convoys meant for Putin's storm of steel were now stuck in the mud waiting for orders that would never arrive. A supply chain frozen solid like a Costco parking lot on Black Friday. Within 72 hours, with Russian command in chaos, Ukraine launched 10 separate counteroffensives. Russia, deprived of artillery and leadership, couldn't react. It was like a football team losing its coach and its quarterback in the middle of the Super Bowl. In the Kremlin, officers were bewildered, meetings were cut short, and somewhere in the Kremlin, Putin's plans shattered like cheap glass. For the cost of a used Toyota Corolla, about $6,500, Ukraine turned a $2 billion Russian arsenal into free fireworks. The lesson is simple. In modern warfare, the winner isn't the one with the most expensive weapon. It's the one who knows how to use $500 to make their enemy lose an empire. Russia had the pride. Ukraine had the plan. You tell me, who wins that fight? Drop your thoughts below.